I'm your host, Nafsika, and joining us today is Arjun Kumar, also known as Arjunius. Arjunius is an academic author, activist, and educator with a background in biology and psychology.
I make a lot of references to the Matrix films in my videos because it's just like the Matrix where
it is.
You could be trying to unplug someone from their programming and then they will automatically get defensive and build a firewall because they don't want to be unprogrammed. So the first thing is...
So speaking of, this meat diet or non-vegan diet, what would you suggest as a counter argument for embracing a plant-based diet instead? I'm your host, Nafsika, and joining us today is Arjun Kumar, also known as Arjunius. Arjunius is an academic author, activist, and educator with a background in biology and psychology. He produces educational and inspirational content on veganism and encourages us to challenge the programming we've all been taught, to think for ourselves. Welcome to the show, Arjunius.
How's it going? It's great to be here.
Great. Nice to have you. Tell us about your name, Arjunius. Where did that come from?
So Arjunius kind of started off as a nickname like way back in high school, but it was basically like the fusion of Arjuna, which my name is based off, right, in the Bhagavad Gita, the main character in the Eastern mythology of the Bhagavad Gita, and then Prometheus, which is a very similar character I found in Greek mythology that I thought really resembled, metaphorically at least, the mission I went out to set with, my content. So it's just kind of an amalgamation of those two stories that I think I took a lot of inspiration in creating my craft. So Arjuna plus Prometheus equals Arjunius.
Awesome. I love it. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey actually into veganism and what motivated you to adopt this lifestyle?
Yeah, so it was quite a long journey. Started off as a meat eater, then eventually made my way into being a vegetarian, and then finally vegan. I think the main catalyst for me was seeing visually the factory farm footage and being like, wow, this just does not feel right with me. But oh well, I have to eat the meat, So then I would always tell myself that I need to eat meat and I need to consume dairy because everyone else around me is doing it, right? So there must be a reason we need to do this. But I always felt like a little unsettled, like when I would see animals being killed, and I personally wouldn't want to do it myself. And then when I started learning more about nutrition, I started learning more about how people on plant-based diets are actually, they're doing well, and it's actually healthier. And then I think the main thing was learning the anatomy of humans, that we thrive on a fully plant-based diet. Although we could be omnivores, although we can be cannibals, although we could be, carnivores, there's a lot of things we could do, but the anatomy itself will thrive in the long term on a plant-based diet. So then it started making sense why psychologically it just felt disturbing because, if we're carnivores or omnivores, we shouldn't have an issue with an animal being killed, right? Just like a lion doesn't be like, oh, I feel bad for killing this goat. No, it just kills it without any remorse. So that started making me think. And then slowly but surely, I would kind of unplug myself from this matrix, right, of programming that people are taught to believe. So that took about a few years for me to get out because I knew it was the right thing to do to go vegan, but it took me a while because I didn't have as much support and resources to know on how to transition. So a few years into veganism, I figured it out. I made some, friends and exchanged some tips, and now I'm like a fully strict vegan. So that was the gist of my story.
That's powerful. And I could totally relate because with the factory farming, that's what really got me, to switch to the vegan lifestyle because, I don't want to harm any animals, So, and then for me, it's like, oh, the perk is you get to be healthy too. There's so many benefits. So speaking of choices, one topic that often that sparks debate often, and we talked about this, you and I, is the carnivore diet. It's gaining popularity and has many followers claiming health benefits and weight loss. What are your thoughts on this diet, especially from a plant-based vegan perspective?
I think it's just a lot of misinformation, and I'm sure people can say misinformation about veganism as well. But if you look at the actual data, as opposed to these, influencers saying, yeah, I went on the carnivore diet and it was amazing and it's great, therefore do it. Carnivore diet is basically just a ketogenic diet. So you can have chronic ketosis, right? it's basically a survival diet, right? Like you may feel good for the short term, right? Just like our ancestors when they were surviving through the ice age, they had to maybe eat meat at a certain point, but on the long term they would be dying a lot quicker because meat is
Oh
not
yeah.
it's not natural for us to be optimally eating forever. So, there's a lot of issues with the carnivore diet. And the funny thing is, like, I think the biggest carnivore diet influencer, as far as I know, is Paul Saladino, right? He was preaching the carnivore diet for 5 years to his followers. He had all these books on the carnivore diet. And then all of a sudden, this guy's getting heart palpitations. His testosterone is dropping. He's having all these issues. And then he starts to incorporate fruit into his diet, calls it I think it was like an animal based diet instead of the carnivore diet. But he basically just incorporated fruit. And then he said he started feeling better after consuming fruit. So that in itself is proof
Yeah.
that
That
being
says a lot.
yeah, and he was like the biggest influencer. So I thought the carnivore diet basically got canceled at that point. But now there's these new, influencers talking about carnivore diet and keeping that trend going. But it's a fad diet. And I think it's eventually going to have a bad rep once enough people figure out that in the long term, it's not going to work. Right now, people are very, innocently jumping on board because they're hearing one of their friends say that they felt good after 6 months on the carnivore diet. But in the long term, it's definitely not good. And it also lacks a lot of, micronutrients. So being fully on meat, it's like, it's not good.
I agree. I think that while there may be some short-term benefits, you're really playing with fire because you're most likely have some long-term implications, like with such a restrictive diet, when there's no vegetables involved. And I mean, you're clogging your arteries, you're eating cholesterol, high fat. I mean, something is bound to go wrong eventually. So it's not a sustainable diet. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, I lost weight. Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's not safe. You might end up having other serious issues, and we've seen. I've been watching people who have escaped the carnivore diet that kind of tried it out, thought they were doing great, and then started having health issues like heart disease, and somebody had a stroke. So there's, these things, like you said, it's a fad. It's going to start coming out. People are going to start waking up and realizing that maybe this is not a great diet. I personally think it has a lot to do with the meat and dairy industry because when the plant-based and vegan movement kind of blew up a few years back, they lost a lot of money, right, in the market, like the meats and the dairy. So my thought is that maybe this was kind of like a way to bring back the loss of sales or something. Like maybe, I don't know, trying to revive those categories. So that's why I'm a little suspicious of this trend. I tell everyone be very careful with this because it's just another name for keto or something. We'll just keep coming up with a new name.
And there's
Also, that's the other
paleo
thing.
before. Paleo was like the carnivore like just
Paleo.
years ago. And then people are like, oh yeah, this isn't good. And then keto, and now they're back on carnivore. They just need a new buzzword that no one's heard of before. And then people
Yeah.
on it. But it's like sometimes the best thing to do is what we've always done, which is eating, healthy plant-based whole foods versus trying to
Mhm.
find like the best new trick on how to eat your diet. But you got to eat what what ancestors ate primarily, which is plants.
Yeah, and a lot of people say like, "Oh, well, the cavemen used to eat this," but they were in survival mode, like you were mentioning. Like you can't compare. And actually, like if I look at my ancestors, or there's the ancient Greek philosophers that everybody knows of, and they were vegetarian. Well, they may have even been vegan, but vegetarian was the term. And this is how it was normal. It was considered normal. But then I don't know what happened. Well, I know what happened. What happened was, I think 100 years ago or so, there was somebody who kind of realized they could make business out of, you know, uh, selling meat and everything, and it just kind of grew from there. I think by the time people caught up on it, it was like this kind of marketing selling point. And by the time people caught up with it, it was too late. It was already out there. Everybody was, eating meat on a daily basis. So it's just a little bit of that, I think. So we're just trying to kind of retrain. A lot of people are trying to retrain themselves back to the basics. I say, this is we're not meant to be eating meat every day or anything. I think it's just if you're supposed to eat meat It's really, I guess it depends where you live, or what's provided, what's around in your environment.
Hmm.
I mean, I think you can survive on completely plant-based diet. I mean, we've been doing it, you and I, and a lot of people for many, many years. There's people that have been vegan for all their lives, 30, 40 years. So, and I think it actually helps you live longer. You have less issues. You have less risk of heart disease and diabetes and all these things. So,
Yeah, and that's an important call out because a lot of animal rights activists that I personally know, these guys aren't interested in what an ancient tribe in, Africa is consuming. Like they're not interested in that. They're more interested in people living in the first world that have access to smartphones, that are on social media, perhaps what they're eating, because the first world people, we actually have a choice when we go to the grocery store, and that choice impacts the rest of the world, impacts animals, impacts the planet. It has this big domino effect.
yeah.
So I think that's what really the movement is all about. It's not about what every single person on living on an island, what they're eating or what they're not eating. It's about more so the bigger picture and kind of trying to retrain civilization on what we consume and how we treat other people as a result of that.
So speaking of, this meat diet or non-vegan diet, what would you suggest as a counter argument for embracing a plant-based diet instead?
Well, I think first you got to be equipped with the knowledge of like what a plant-based diet can help you with and what it can solve, and basically knowing that there's no deficiencies in it. Because I think there's just so many misconceptions that happen, and you can do your research, you can read a book. I think the easiest thing is just to watch like a 1 hour documentary, like maybe The Game Changers. That's probably a really impressive one, I think, that a lot of people enjoy because it's focusing on athletes, right? So
Yeah.
so like if even if you're just an average Joe and you don't, work out that much, but just seeing how professional athletes actually improve their health, endurance, workout, recovery time, just by following a whole foods plant-based diet, you'll actually like see like how well, if it's planned well, how much of a benefit it can have on just your overall well-being. So I think just starting out with just the knowledge to equip yourself so that you're kind of immune to other programming when people start attacking you, because they probably will attack you once you go, on a plant-based diet, and you need to know why you're doing it, what the benefits are, what the alternatives are that you're consuming, how everything kind of works to at least a baseline foundational degree.
And I think you should also have some, like, in your back pocket, some quick arguments, like some comebacks, when they tell you something, like, oh, you have to be able to prove to them right away your point, on why it's better to be plant-based or vegan.
Yeah, and I think conceptually the main argument that I will say that people always go, oh, I didn't think about it that way, was when they say, well, how are you going to get your B12? How are you going to get your iron? How are you going to get your protein? My go-to counter is just, where do you think the animal gets it from?
That's what I say.
And then they're just, wait a second, I never thought about that. I'm just like,
Doot, doot, doot,
dude,
doot.
why go through a middleman when you can just get it straight from the source?
You took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I say. I say, like, why are you using recycled nutrients? Why not go straight to the source, So yeah, exactly. That's what I always throw back right away, because they don't realize, like, they're like, oh, it's true. The animals eat the plant-based that I'm consuming. Why don't I just go straight? And they're being fed B12 in their feed, right?
Yeah, and they're given like pills and antibiotics. So it's like people have a
Yeah.
problem with taking a B12 pill, but it's like, where's the pig getting it from? They're giving them pills in their feed. So it's like, if either way, you're taking the pill somehow, even the antibiotics. So
Yeah.
it just causes unnecessary filtering and more issues inside the meat. So
That's right. And then there's people that will say, well, okay, how about pescatarian? Like fish, we can eat fish at least. But for that, I say I have two kind of arguments there. I say, well, either you're going to eat farmed fish that are full of antibiotics because the fish are sick or whatever, or you're going to be eating plastic because there's plastic in the ocean right now, wild fish. So
yeah, microplastics, antibiotics, and then there's parasites. And then
yeah, parasites.
and even if there's no parasites and you freeze them to kill the parasites, you still got mercury. You can't get rid of the mercury poisoning in fish.
Yeah.
And And the thing is, like, again, it comes back to like, even if you don't care about the health aspect, it's still like unnecessary. So it's just like a moral issue, because when you can get everything a fish gets from seaweed, from chia seeds, all those omega-3s that are in the fish that people usually consume it for, you can get it from a cheaper and easier to access plant-based source, right? So by killing the fish, you're just doing it for like your own like pleasure and ego at that point. You're not doing it because you're thinking about what's happening in the oceans and what's happening in the environment and what's happening to the fish. You're just thinking about, I just, I like the taste of it. But it's like, it just becomes a moral issue at that point.
Yeah. Let's talk about programming that we mentioned before, undoing what we've been taught. Can you elaborate on that concept and how it relates to our food choices?
Yeah, so I think in general, there's a lot of programs that we're fed, right? The second we're born into this world, we're just fed programs. And the way most animals learn things is just mimicry. We just mimic our surroundings. We just mimic whatever's around us. The issue is not all the time is what is happening around us is a good thing for us. So as adults, I think it's really, really important to just self-evaluate and do an audit of everything you're doing in your life and everything you've been taught to see if it's benefiting you and benefiting others. So that's really the gist of breaking out of that programming, and why I think it's important, because you don't know what you're doing is wrong until you actually self-reflect and say, okay, I've been talking like this, or I've been doing this, or I've been consuming this, whatever I've been doing for the past 20, 30 years, because everyone around me was doing it. But I don't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing. And now you got to really think about it, if what you're doing is going to align with your actual morality. And that's why a lot of people have cognitive dissonance when they're met with vegans. Hence why vegans get so much hate, because they're basically just telling them that, hey, you've been programmed to consume this when you really don't have to. And now they're trying to defend the past 30 years of their entire life on why they've been doing something so unconsciously. So I make a lot of references to the Matrix films in my videos, because it's just like the Matrix, where
it is.
You could be trying to unplug someone from their programming, and then they will automatically get defensive and build a firewall because they don't want to be unprogrammed. So the first thing is you have to be willing to accept that you have been programmed. If you're not willing to accept that, then it's going to be very hard for you to even understand your own brainwashing. Right. And it takes a lot of humility to even get to that point. But once you're at that point, then you can start to actually self-reflect and see, why am I consuming meat? Is it just because my whole family does it? My friends do it? That's it? Now it's a conformity bias issue, right? So then right there, it's just like, okay, there's no actual sustainable scientific research or, moral or moral obligation I have to be consuming meat, other than the fact that just people around me are doing it. And more often than not, I find that's the most common reason, just conformity. And that's just a bias. That's not reality. That's just, I'm doing it because everyone else is doing it. So there's a lot of ways people can be programmed, right? It could be misinformation as well. It can be people around them saying something, or it could just be them trying to defend what they've been doing for such a long time, without having an actual foundation for why they decided to do it, without having actual morality or research or something truly that's going to ground them on that for the long term. And it could be deteriorating their health, and they'll still, be addicted to it just because they want to pretend like they know exactly what they're doing was correct, even if deep down inside they feel like there might be some moral or health issue with it.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, and a lot of truth to that. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Arjunius. Your insights on plant-based lifestyle and carnivore diet are invaluable, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure talking.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Nafsika's View, your weekly dose of insight and inspiration.